Welcome back to the second in the lecture series on how to improve and succeed at a small school. Today, we're going to be covering strategies to improve on your own. So these are things you can do without a coach, both at your home or at a tournament, to make yourself better without necessarily needing to have anyone else participate or helping. So these are like do-it-yourself strategies. These are going to be kind of 5 overarching strategies or 5 tips in order to make this work. We'll go through each of them, but it'll be like 5 overarching things. There'll be some stuff in there like more specifically, but think of it as like 5 strategies with some specifics. And these are all things you can do as well. So first tip, use judges as coaches. Now, this kind of takes 2 forms. So the first is after a round ends, there's an opportunity to ask questions. This is a great time to learn and get feedback on how you did in the debate. What are some things you could have changed? That kind of thing. Some of my go-to questions include, what would you have liked to see changed about my speeches? Now that's an interesting question to ask, as it doesn't ask them what did they like or dislike about the speeches, but it's what would they have changed. So that includes what they may be, what they didn't like, but also strategic changes they would have liked to see, etc. Another good question would be, do you have any tips for improvement? This is kind of just a basic generic one, but this will get the judge talking. They can give you some feedback. All those pointers are helpful. Third question would be, did my 2AC or 2NC help set up the 2AR or 2NR? Now, this is a good end of round strategic question. This demonstrates to the judge kind of next level debate thinking, but also is a good way for them to convey to you how they felt the round was going, whether they felt like the middle of the debate, whether they felt your constructives were helping to lead towards the ultimate conclusion point, and whether or not they would make strategic changes there on which arguments to make, arguments to extend, etc. The last question I want to point out would be, did we make the right decisions in the middle and into the debate? Now, notice I'm specifying middle. Again, being from a smaller school, it's like, I know from experience, we don't always have the resources to be like, we have to go with a completely different strategy. And so you can take that off the table by specifying middle and into the debate. Then what you're really asking about is, did I make the right decision strategically with what I had? And that's a better learning experience. Because we could all sit there and be like, yeah, we wish we had this argument. We wish we had that argument. Yeah, that would be great. And that doesn't really help us anything, which is the kind of answers you're likely to get and the emotions you feel. If you ask about like, did we make the right arguments, etc. But if you ask about middle and end of round vision, that is a way to be like, we have the arguments. We might get a couple more when we have the time to research, but it's like, these are the arguments we got. Now, how did we execute them? Did we execute them properly? Do you have any tips for execution, etc., which are good ways to make sure you're using the arguments you have effectively. And then leading out of that, you could ask, are there any additional arguments you would have liked to see? You can mark those down as possibilities for research. But again, this is especially coming from debating in a small school where you won't have all the resources and research ability of a big school. It's like, you need to be able to use what you have effectively. And these questions can kind of get you there. The second step to using judges as coaches is to follow up via an email. So whether it's just, thank you for answering my questions, I really appreciate it. Follow up with more questions like, I thought about what you said. I have a specific question about like X or Y. Most judges would love to get back to you, etc. They want to help you out. If you stay involved, if you ask questions, they want to give you feedback. And emailing me helps get to, if you didn't have time to ask all the questions you wanted to ask, say the tournament's running on like a tight schedule, you can then send that email to get all your questions answered, all your concerns addressed, etc. The only other thing I'd want to point out here is bounce ideas off of them. Like, actually use them as more than just judges giving feedback on your speech, but you can bounce ideas off of them. And this kind of ties in with like additional arguments and recharacterization of the round. So let's say you read the state's counter plan and you lose on a permutation. You could ask about like, well, we made this process argument. Would it have been better if instead of characterizing the process in the way we did, if instead of making process-based answers, we made a more substantive answer about the states being superior and federal involvement overseeing it and taking away from state effectiveness? And the judge would either be like, sure, that sounds great, or no, that doesn't sound like as good of idea, but by bouncing ideas off of them, you're making both an active learning process and you're engaging the judge to think about the debate in a new way and take on a more of a coaching role after the round, which is something that can be helpful when you're debating for a small school. Now, this is also a good tip for if you're debating for a big school, but it's particularly helpful for a small school where you may not have like as many coaches, etc. The second tip I want to go over is watch debates online. So this includes both live debate rounds and recorded debate rounds. The difference would be when they're happening. So if you're on or attending online tournaments, at one point you're eliminated, you can watch the like elimination rounds, etc. And you can also go on YouTube and watch recorded debates. I know the NDT for a long time has many rounds dating back to even like 2013 on YouTube, so you can watch lots of those. Lots of the rounds from the previous NDT in 2021 are all on there, so you can go watch those kinds of rounds. The difference being when you're watching live rounds and recorded high school rounds of the topic, you're getting more topic specific knowledge. When you're watching rounds from previous years, you're getting more just generic debate knowledge, but both of those things are valuable. The second thing I would say here is flow those rounds, both whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching a recording. This is valuable in two regards. First, it practices your flowing skills. It makes you better at flowing because the more you do it, the better you get at it. But second, it helps you characterize and see arguments, both in how you're grouping them together, how you're flowing them, but also how the debaters interact with them. So which arguments are they grouping? How are they grouping them together, etc. But then it also allows you at the end of the round to think through an evaluatory process. So first, what did the debaters do well? And what can you learn from that? Second, what did you think they do poorly? And what could you learn from that in order to not have that be a mistake that you do? Like, none of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes in any given debate round. Those are things others can learn from. And you can also see the things we do well and learn from those. Lastly, I would say, especially if you're watching, say, a live round where you could stay for the decision or a recorded round where they include the decision in RFD, make your own decision. Come to your own decision about who you would have voted for, your reasoning for doing so, potentially even write up a ballot on the back of your flow, why you voted for them, what arguments were compelling, what were not, and then listen to the judge's RFD and see if they match. Because that honestly is one of the biggest learning experiences and helps you see the round through a judge's eyes, which is both very educational in how you view and understand debate, but also a way to get inside judge psychology so that when you're giving end of round speeches, you can kind of see what are the judges thinking, how can I cater to their needs, how can I cater to what they're looking for in this speech to get that ballot. My third tip would be make connections. I know from personal experience, and this might not be true for everyone, but coming from a smaller school, we didn't always travel to big national circuit tournaments. We did more local debate, etc. That, I mean, has downsides in the sense you're not going to these huge national tournaments, but also has the upsides, and you can make relationships, have friendships with local judges, local coaches, and fellow local debaters. Some of my best friends from debate were all local debaters who I met debating on the local circuit. I made friends with coaches and judges I met, which then gave me more feedback, gave me rapport with them, helped me prep for nationals. These are relationships and friendships you can build upon that can then help you come through. One great example would be my sophomore year. I went to NSDA's in World School Debate, and that entire summer I'm practicing with members the way we did it in Kansas were from other schools in my district. So there were teams of 5, there were 2 of us. There's 10 debaters from different schools all over our district, so all over the city of Wichita and surrounding area. We all came together, worked together as a team, made friendships, and those friendships lasted for the next 2 years, and I'm friends with these people even to this day. And those relationships both made like the in-debate rounds more fun, but also made the out-of-debate rounds more fun. These were people you could go to, pitch ideas to, like think about things differently, being like, hey, did you see that round last week? What did you think about this argument, etc., which are ways to not only make good friends, feel connected with the broader debate community, but also you can learn a thing or two. It's like, let's say you didn't make it out of prelims at a tournament, but your friend did. You could go watch them, learn something from that round, out round, etc. The same thing is true with judges and coaches who all helped us coach with that World School team, even though they weren't our high school coach. It's like making those relationships helped over the next couple of years, being able to talk to these judges, talk to these coaches, learn, get their debate advice, their view on debate, and just kind of using those connections to improve your skills where you may only have limited access to your coach. My fourth tip would be utilize other online resources beyond watching debate rounds. So the first kind of main point would be here, kind of mentioned in the first lecture, subscribe to channels and forums that create debate content. The MSU Debate YouTube page is a great one. Exodus Files on YouTube that publishes a lot of NDT rounds is a good one. Join the high school debate wiki. If your team's not on it, it's really easy to get on. You basically just go in and create an account. It's the same as your tab room account, and then you just ask them to create your school and they will. Get involved in those kind of forums. The second would be, as I said, use open evidence in the high school wiki to fill gaps in your research. It's like, again, use it as the starting point, use it as a building block in a way to expand your knowledge and understanding. In particular, later in the season, the high school wiki is super helpful in terms of analyzing what is the round going to look like, how can we adjust accordingly, which is something we'll get into more in the fourth lecture. Again, as a reminder, always retag, recut evidence you're taking both from open evidence and the high school wiki, but those are both valuable resources to get new cards, get new articles, etc. That would be helpful in creating better, more complex, advancing your strategy and developing it throughout the year. The fifth and final tip I'll say is do drills. Now this one might seem kind of out there, be like, well, we normally do drills, practice speeches, etc. with our coach. Yeah, that's great. We'll talk about that more in the third section, but there are also drills you can do at home. So the first one I would say to mention are speed drills. I'm going to list through a couple of my favorites. So my go-to is word insertion. The word I use right now is a. So it'd be like, for example, use a, judges a, as a, coaches a, ask a, lots a, of a, post, etc. And that helps build your enunciation as you're saying words, and also helps you create kind of a rhythm when you're reading. I would say don't use this drill overly a lot, like don't do it every time you do speed drills, and make sure when you're actually giving like practice speeches, you don't fall back in the habit of like saying the word you're inserting, but it's a good way to get enunciation. The next one I would point out is backwards reading. So this would be reading text backwards. So you'd start at the bottom and you read each word as it goes across. And this really helps train your brain to not like read in sentences, but to read each individual word, which is not super helpful when you're reading a book, but is very helpful when you're trying to read faster, because then you're not trying to process each sentence. You're just seeing a word, saying the word, seeing a word, saying a word. And that's how you get faster and spread more effectively. The third one I would say is building speed. So this is a drill where you start slow conversational pace, and then you slowly get faster and 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 faster until you go faster than you want to be going in a debate round. The way I like to do it is maybe do it for like 3-minute intervals. Every 30 to 45 seconds, start building and getting faster as you're reading through the evidence. And this is both a good warm-up drill, but also a good one if you do repeats or do it for longer periods, like 9 minutes, where you go through the progression every 3, to both build your endurance and build your ability to change speeds, which is useful in a debate when you want to put emphasis on certain arguments. Another fun one, those of you that are big fans of music, you can pull the lyrics up, put them on the screen, and then play back the music on increased time speed. This is both a drill I do for warm up, but also one I just do when I want to do some speed drills and kind of have it be lighthearted, and maybe put on a go-to good one would be Alphabet Aerobics by Black Alicious, because then you're really working on your enunciation, but you're also working on your speed, and it kind of builds with speed. So it's mixing a couple of these drills together. So that's a good one. The last drill I would mention is an enunciation drill. So really overemphasize every word. So for example, it might sound like, I went to the store last week and I bought some cookies, etc. So you're like overemphasizing. And this is a good one to do at the very beginning before you start doing speed drills. So this would be the first one to do. So make sure your jaw's loosened up and your enunciation is getting there. So then as you increase in speed, your enunciation stays there and you're understandable and clear. The second kind of drill you can do is rebuttal redos. Now I get it. These are things you do with your coaches. We'll get into that. Yes, you should do these with your coaches. The extension you can do with yourself, though, is you can record yourself And you can do this with practice 2NCs and 2ACs as well, where you give a practice speech, record it, and then watch yourself giving that speech. You will be amazed on how much you can learn watching yourself, how you sound, how you characterize certain arguments, etc., which will be way more, or which is super educational. You can be like, oh, I didn't sound clear reading this evidence at all. And then you can go and fix that, watch yourself again, learn from yourself. This is a drill I do with my coaches, even when I have a coach there, is you still record your speech, you still watch it, you still listen to it, because you can learn a lot, both from hearing their feedback, but also from watching yourself saying, well, I didn't sound good there. I sounded really good there. Let's keep that going. How can I take my successes there and move it to where I'm failing? Recording yourself is also something you can carry through to actual debate rounds. So let's say, I would say always ask for permission first, but I don't think most people would be opposed if you like even voice record yourself as you're giving your speech at tournaments. Most people would be like, yeah, that seems fine. As long as you're not recording them, I don't think people really have problems. And then even if you don't see yourself, you can listen to yourself and see, how did I sound? How effective did I sound, etc., which is a useful learning process and a way to help police yourself, control your language, etc., and refine it down to a better process. So those are kind of the 5 overarching tips, I would say, and strategies I used in high school improving on my own. So using judges as coaches, watching available debates online, subscribing and getting connected with online resources. So both like debate channels, content creators, and then like the high school wiki and open evidence, connecting with members of your local circuit, and lastly, doing drills and record yourself doing practice speeches so you can watch them again. So those are the 5 tips for improving on your own. In our next lecture, we're going to talk through some strategies you can use with your coach to also help improve your debates.